This is just horrific. What they did to this person is just wrong.
A brutal killing.
It was just kind of like a dream, a bad dream.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
He built a reputation for beating people, hurting people.
Make no mistake, there were people there that witnessed this, that felt that it was wrong.
We're like, well, can you tell us who did it? He said, talk to the females.
She was irate. She didn't want to have nothing to do with us.
The truth will be revealed.
He tells everybody, if anybody speaks, the same thing will happen to you.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Nestled along the shores of Lake Michigan lies the rural community of Covert Township.
Covert is very diverse. You have everybody from the fruit pickers that are coming in, the migrants, to the people that own several $100,000 homes.
A lot of families leave Chicago and come to Covert because we're trying to get away from that city life.
Idyllic perhaps, but there are always dangers hiding in the darkness.
A call was placed to 911 stating that a woman was hit by a car out on Blue Star Highway.
Responding officers find the 34-year-old woman still alive, barely.
The lady was identified as Deborah Boothby. She was saying, please don't let me die.
Ambulance arrived, and she ended up dying on the way to the hospital.
7 in the morning, just banging on my door. That's my grandmother and my cousins, and my grandma was just crying, and she was just like, your mom's dead. It was just kind of like a dream, a bad dream. I just turned around and went back in my room, lay down, and just was like, kind of in shock. My mom was kind of like the glue. When she passed away, everybody kind of just fell apart. I just cried all the time, all the time.
Despite their efforts, police are unable to identify the person who may have run Deborah over. For 9 years, the case goes unsolved, until Michigan State Police detectives Diane Oppenheim and Kyle Gorham, along with Covert Township's detective Jay Allen, take it on.
So when you open up a cold case, you have to understand the case from ground zero. You have to take it all the way back to the very beginning.
This starts with the original medical examiner's report.
Forensic evidence plays a significant role in cold cases. It may cause investigators to look at something subtle that wasn't picked up initially. Sometimes it could change the entire direction of the investigation.
There was a lot of bruising, and the body was mangled in such a way that it was consistent with a car running over the body. The autopsy report noted the high blood alcohol content. So the theory was she wandered into the road and got ran over.
It's a rural highway. There is a lot of tree cover, especially in the evening hours. It gets very dark where you can't see much of anything.
If it's a true hit and run, it's a vehicular homicide or manslaughter. It is a lesser charge than capital murder.
But it became apparent to us that there may have been some foul play that occurred prior to Deborah Boothby being struck on the roadway.
We focused on an injury to her face, which was consistent with being involved in a physical fight.
She had teeth missing, and there was a large amount of bruising to her head versus directly to the middle torso where she was struck by the motor vehicle.
Her face was completely black and blue. She had lacerations on her face where portions were basically just gouged away.
All of a sudden, you're starting to see, wait a minute, there's more to this. It's no longer a hit and run. It's now a murder.
In cases such as this, it's important to try to figure out the puzzle of what was the sequence of events, because it tells you the story of what happened.
The cold case detectives begin to trace Deborah's movements in the last 24 hours of her life.
We needed to know where she had been, where she would travel to, who she had been with, up to the point that she was struck by a vehicle. We started to talk to folks that were closest to her, family members. She always worked. She was providing a good home for her family. She had a little bit of a nightlife, but other than that, for the most part, she was a single mom taking care of her children.
She lived in that community her whole life. She was also one that was pretty feisty and was not one to back down from anybody. Deborah Boothby's mother said that she had been working that day. She got off work around 7 p.m.
Her mother says Deborah had made plans with her cousin, Brenda.
Brenda and Deborah had actually went to a bar in South Haven, which is nearby Culver Township.
At one point, they split in the evening. Deborah ended up wanting to go out to the Blue Star Lounge, and Brenda wanted to stay where she was at. She ended up going out to the Blue Star Lounge about 10:45.
The Blue Star Lounge was a small after-hours bar that would get a lot of people in the evening hours. It could be a powder keg with things that could happen there.
The family members believed that on this particular night, she went there to confront her former boyfriend, who was Ivory Shaver.
Ivory Shaver and Deborah Boothby had been in a relationship on and off for years. They were always fighting, and there'd been a lot of abusive past between the two of them.
Ivory Shaver had had many run-ins with law enforcement.
Ivory was the type of person that did what he wanted to do. He was just a bad boy, I guess. I don't know if that's what attracted my mom.
The Shaver family is a very prominent family. There are a lot of nice individuals, okay? But like in any large family, there are 2 or 3 bad apples.
My uncle always used to say how he never really messed with the Shavers. They came in packs. So if you had a problem with one, you had a problem with them all.
Detectives learned that Deborah had been assaulted by Ivory just a few days before her death.
There was an argument that took place. It appeared to be over money. He left, and Deborah was pretty pissed off.
As we developed the timeline for this incident and the people of interest that we wanted to speak with, Ivory Shaver was definitely on that timeline.
Ivory was a stone cold man, period.
Michigan cold case detectives have their first person of interest in Deborah Boothby's death, her ex-boyfriend, Ivory Shaver.
He's going to have to account for his movements on that day. And if his explanation doesn't hold water with the police, he's going to be the #1 suspect.
We felt he was an individual that was capable of committing this crime.
They find Shaver in prison, serving time for a home invasion.
When Ivory was initially interviewed, he didn't give up much information at all.
When I was asking him questions about his relationship with Deborah, he spoke of her very fondly.
Ivory confirms their relationship was over and says he was dating another woman, Chevalier Gill.
He admitted to seeing Deborah that night at the Blue Star Lounge at about 11:30.
He said that he left with Chevalier Gill long before Deborah ended up in the roadway.
He said he had nothing to do with it. And he thought she was walking down the road and an accidental hit.
The violent history between Ivory and Deborah raises doubt about his story.
When you receive an alibi, your primary objective is to disprove the alibi. Telephone records clearly are very helpful, but so are video, CCTV, witness information, canvas information. It takes time. You may spend weeks on it, but you have to chase that alibi down.
They turn to the Blue Star Lounge staff for help.
The bar owner was very reserved, didn't provide us with a lot of information. The bar owner had a girlfriend that also worked out there. And when we asked her about the number of individuals that were in the bar that night, she was very quick to tell us that it was 99, which was the allowed limit by the liquor license. But we worked a lot of long hours, and we were able to obtain quite a list of individuals that we knew 100% that were there at the Blue Star Lounge on that evening.
The problem was that nobody was talking.
There was a lot of rumors about it after it happened. But I know there was people there, like people that I knew and was close to. But people didn't really want to say anything.
99% of the people we talked to said I was in the bathroom. Well, if you knew the bathroom of the Blue Star Lounge, it was one stall, 3 foot by 3 foot, and we had 350 people in the bathroom. We started to see that there was a pattern developing here that didn't make sense.
They were up against a number of different factors. One, a lot of the people had criminal records. Two, they were anti-police. When people are vague with the information that they're giving, that's an indicator to us or any investigator that there's more information there. And the people just do not want to be involved or are scared about the information that they do have.
They just never wanted to get themselves involved. If they talk their fear that now I have to live in this community, nobody wants to be the snitch.
I think that was the most difficult part. They did not want to be talking with us.
All too often, we run into cases where there's a wall of silence, there's a lack of information, whether it's cultural, whether it's just fear of the killers or the bad people involved in this, you have to sit back again and look for the Achilles heel. What's the way in to get this information?
To break the silence, detectives set up an anonymous tip line.
We received a tip on one of our local drug dealers that was known to be very violent. And we kept repeatedly getting tips on this individual. And everybody's saying, talk to him. When a name that significant pops up, you got to be able to say, okay, no, and rule them out completely.
The dealer, Eric Hollis, was reported seen at the Blue Star Lounge the night Deborah was killed.
So we called him in, and we had him write out a statement what he did that evening. He was at the bar before Deborah even showed up.
Police press Hollis about why he was there in a bid to connect him to Deborah.
He said the reason he went to the bar was so that he could create himself an alibi for his extramarital activities. He was, at the time, married, but he had a girlfriend, so we had to discreetly verify that with the girlfriend. It turns out he was at the bar, basically got a drink and was out of there. Deborah was dropped off at the bar at some point after that. So when you look at Deborah Boothby's timeline from beginning all the way to the end, at no point do those two even cross.
This makes the sheer number of calls implicating Hollis puzzling.
In cold cases, it isn't uncommon for an individual to call in to try and deflect the investigation in another direction.
But the interview isn't a complete loss.
One of the questions we asked was, can you tell us who did it? And it was interesting. He didn't tell us, but he said, you need to talk to those bitches. He was telling us, talk to the females. We now have a direction to go in.
There was a number of women out at the Blue Star Lounge that evening. We started off trying to build that relationship with them, but they were very difficult to gain trust.
Normally, I'm talking to females in a cold case setting. If they're not directly involved, they're going to be the ones that will open up earlier than a male would. But in this area, domestic violence was somewhat prevalent, so there was a lot of fear. They don't want any repercussions. You've got to develop a rapport with them. It may take 4 times sitting down with that person on different occasions before they even warm up to you enough to get the information that you need. So it's a long process, and you got to have patience.
Their perseverance pays off when the interviews unearth a familiar name.
There was witnesses that talked about Letitia Holling. She was a friend of Chevalier Gill's. And she was placed at the Blue Star Lounge that evening. She was partying with Chevalier Gill. It was believed that Letitia Holling was one of the last ones to leave.
This means Letitia may know who Deborah was with and how she left the bar.
So with that, we had to really take some time to dive into her timeline and who she hung out. We looked into some individuals who were in the car with her when she left the bar. Kyle and I and Diane, when we sat down with them, one flat out just was in tears. and then told us Letitia Holling ran over Deborah Boothby.
After 9 years of silence, detectives believe Letitia Holling may be involved in Deborah Boothby's tragic death.
In talking with Letitia Holling, she was forthcoming about knowing Deborah. And she is also someone who Chevalier Gill confided in.
But through the interview with Tisha, Tisha never admitted to hitting Deborah. So Letitia Holling was one that we did offer a polygraph examination to.
If they're dealing with someone who, say, is not a career criminal, sometimes the polygraph alone can be enough to intimidate somebody into confessing, because it is a tool. You're hooked up to this thing, your palms are sweating, your face is dripping wet, and you're all nervous. And then they realize, am I going to get caught in a lie?
We asked Letitia Holling, did you hit Deborah Boothby while leaving the Blue Star Lounge? The results came back that she wasn't being truthful. We knew at that point when she failed, she's withholding something. So now we gotta go back and figure out, okay, where are you being deceptive? Tell us again what you remember. Now we're going at you hard, because we know somehow you're involved. Tisha did break down crying, so I do believe that she knows something happened. But here's a single mother of 2 or 3 kids, just sitting here going, I'm not saying a word. I've got babies to raise. Is it right? Absolutely not. It's completely wrong. But sometimes as investigators, we have to put ourselves in that position and say, okay, I guess I can understand.
We had to keep building that rapport, building the confidence, and really building that trust.
Over 3 separate interviews, Letitia gradually begins to open up.
She said she witnessed an argument between Deborah Boothby and Ivory Shaver at the Blue Star Lounge that evening. So that brought to light this whole new element. And then you add in, the altercation that they had earlier in the week. Ivory knew a lot more than what he was willing to tell us.
She said Deborah confronted Ivory Shaver, whom was with Chevy Gill.
It appeared to most to be a fight involving a love triangle, because Deborah saw Ivory with Chevy.
The drink was thrown on Ivory by Deborah, and then that caused a verbal fight.
And she indicated that things were just getting out of control, and she had no way of being able to stop it.
The Blue Star Lounge closed that evening early due to this altercation that was occurring inside.
When we had this information about this fight, we thought, okay, maybe there's a little bit more to this story. Now, when you go and do your interviews, you want to focus on that fight.
Detectives return to their pool of female observers to learn what happened to Deborah after the fight inside the bar.
One witness we went into a very dangerous part of Kalamazoo to talk to. We took her to a fast food joint and purchased a burger for her. And I knew that she had some domestic violence in her past. So after about an hour of getting nowhere, again, we use that emotional side. Hey, I know you were a victim of domestic violence. You know, this could have been you. You know, this almost was you a couple times. And that's when she broke down. We then learn there's a second fight in the parking lot.
She tells detectives she witnessed a mob attack Deborah right outside the bar.
She described the beating of Deborah Boothby as dogs fighting over a bone. That's how fierce it was.
Everyone was kicking and beating and stomping on her.
The witness reluctantly names the ringleaders. Her ex-boyfriend, Ivory Shaver, Ivory's nephew, Scotty Shaver, and a local drug dealer named Ed Foster.
Scotty Shaver is just a young kid who was out of control, short temper, in and out of trouble all the time with law enforcement. And that's, you know, from break-ins to drug trafficking, you name it.
Ed Foster was an associate with the Shaver family.
You know, they're both trying to build their own drug trade.
Ivory, Scotty, and Chevy Gill were all punching and kicking Deborah.
They would have never did that had I been there. Never. Somehow she ended up being there by herself. So she wouldn't have been there by herself had I been there.
At one point, Ed Foster hit her so hard that she was motionless on the ground of the parking lot. Everybody froze and thought, oh my gosh, she's dead.
The witness then adds a puzzling detail.
Deborah had been placed into a car, unconscious. And as they were leaving the parking lot, the vehicle that she was in had turned left, which meant that the vehicle went south. That became a question point because we know that her body was found north of the Blue Star Lounge.
Now all of a sudden, you're starting to go, well, wait a minute. If she's beaten, and everybody's saying, oh yeah, she was knocked out, and people were saying, we gotta go, police are gonna come. And now she's being dragged and put in a car. At what point was she walking down the road and gets hit? You're going, there's more to this.
With multiple suspects on their radar, detectives must unravel the mystery of what happened to Deborah Boothby after she was attacked and taken from the Blue Star Lounge.
I think a lot of people were scared of Ivory Shaver and Scotty Shaver at that point in time.
We knew that people were reaching out in the community from the Shaver family and were threatening witnesses.
After it came out, they were investigating them. Scotty came to me, he was like, can I talk to you for a minute? And he was like, I just want to tell you, I didn't have nothing to do with it. I mean, he just swore up and down, I wasn't there, you know, I didn't do anything. We've known each other for years, I would never do nothing like that. So I said, well, the truth will come out eventually. But I just stopped talking to a lot of people because I didn't know who to trust.
With the powerful Shaver family stonewalling, detectives must find a way to get straight answers about Deborah's death.
We knew that Adrienne Burnett was in that circle. We were told that she was in a dating relationship with Scotty at that time.
We went right to her house, knocked on the door, And she said, "What can we do for you?" And we said, "We're here. We've reopened the Boothby case." Adrian turned white as a ghost.
You can see the fear factor in her face. Obviously, there's something. She's really concerned about why we're there.
Adrian's now a mom herself and a very good mother. I mean, she was going to school and really engaged with her kids. I could tell that this had been weighing on her. I was just hoping that she was finally gonna get some relief.
We're like, "Talk to us about this."
Adrian Burnett admitted to saying, "Yes, I was at the Blue Star Lounge that night." But she also was pretty vague in her recollection. She said she really didn't have much to do with the fight or any part of that, and was really trying to distance herself from the situation.
When we're just making contact with somebody for the first time, we try to employ a lot of empathy to let them understand where we're coming from. We're asking them to understand it as if this was their own loved one as well. And to let them know if it was, we would be out here doing the same thing for them.
And after the course of 4 hours, Adrian Burnett admitted to driving over Deborah Boothby. And that's when we kind of stopped and we said, "Okay, we want you to go through the whole timeline of what happened, what you did," and she agreed. Adrian was at the bar when everybody got kicked out of the bar. The fight continued.
Adrian's account was when it went outside. It was a very, very brutal assault that occurred.
And then what happened?
She tried to defend herself. She did a very good job, you know. At first, she held her own for a minute there. But with that many people, you know, it's difficult.
Deborah Boothby had gotten knocked down to the ground.
Ed Foster, Ivory Shaver, and Scotty pick her up and drag her to Chevy Gill's car.
Ivory and Scotty pushed her in there and made her get in.
Was she trying not to get in?
Yes.
Adrian Burnett got into her own car. Scotty gets in the car with Adrian. Scotty tells her, "Follow that car." They drive out of the parking lot, head left. They get to Covert Township Park to a little roundabout.
We get to the dead end. We pull around the little circle area. Scotty gets off the car.
They drag her out of the car, where all four just take turns.
Chevy choked her. Scotty came in here, Ivory hit her.
Did she appear to be scared?
Yes. She's screaming, you know, yelling. Scotty hit her one last time, and that's when she fell down to the ground. After that last punch, she didn't move anymore.
They've beaten her so bad, they believe she's dead.
Chevy screaming, you know, what are we going to do with her? We can't leave her here, you know, everybody's seen us put her in the car. Ivory said, okay, well, put her back in the car, and we're going to run over her, make it look like it was an accident.
They load her up in Chevy Gill's car. They drive her back to the lounge. In the parking lot are still several individuals. Scotty gets out and tells everybody, if anybody speaks, the same thing will happen to you.
Detectives coax a disturbing confession from a fearful Adrian Burnett about the murder of Deborah Boothby.
Ivory and Ed Foster have laid Deborah on the road and have run her over with their car. After that happens, Adrian Burnett is now pulling out of the lounge.
We get out of the driveway, Scotty says, run that bitch over.
And Adrian guns the car and runs her over. Tisha Holling was right behind, probably ran her over, was like, oh my gosh, what did I just hit? Adrian Burnett goes straight home. She is now distraught. Scotty tells her to shut her mouth, and she explains to us she was in fear of her life because if she said anything, if she gave him up, she would be dead.
As far as brutality, this was one of the most brutal cases. Make no mistake, there were people there that witnessed this, that felt that it was wrong, but they also had feelings for themselves of basically being scared of this other family.
Where was anybody to help Deborah Boothby? All these people were her friends, all these people she knew, and nobody cared. They still treated her like an animal.
I was angry. I was angry with people that were there that didn't stop it. 'Cause I was around these people for that whole 11 years. But I always knew in the back of my head there was something not right. Just the fact that people that I knew and was close to had a hand in taking my mother away. For what?
Armed with witness statements, police move on the 4 conspirators.
Ivory was in prison the whole time we were investigating, and he was up for parole, and we actually went to the parole board and stopped his parole because we knew he was dangerous and could threaten people.
We discovered where Ed Foster was located. We had him picked up in Indianapolis.
Scotty Shaver and Chevalier Gill are also arrested. But as the trial begins, a conviction isn't as simple as it seems.
The thing that made me nervous was our witnesses were so scared. Our suspects are very dangerous individuals, and if you speak, you could end up like she did. During this whole time that Adrian was working with us, she was receiving threats from Scotty and Ed Foster, being reminded to shut up. One of the things Kyle and I did, we were reassuring witnesses. We would drive to wherever they were, pick them up, get them to trial, and the whole time we were reassuring, nothing's gonna happen. We will protect you. They can't get to you. Just tell the truth.
It's the testimony from those eyewitnesses that reveals the details of Deborah Boothby's final hours.
Deborah got up, went to work. She got off work around 7 p.m. After she got home, she met up with her cousin, Brenda, and she ended up going out to the Blue Star Lounge about 10:45. There was a fight inside the Blue Star Lounge. And eventually she was escorted out of the building about 12:30. There was an additional fight that occurred in the parking lot. She was then put inside a vehicle and moved to the Covert Township Park, where Scotty Shaver and Chevalier Gill And Ivory Shaver and Ed Foster continued to beat her. And they came up with a plan to dump her body and make it look like an accident.
Deborah's body was placed out on the roadway and then ran over multiple times.
And at approximately 3:16 a.m., she was pronounced dead.
I believe the motive was hatred, just an opportunity to just beat somebody senseless. They had just no moral compass to continue to beat and beat another human being to the point that they just killed them.
Thanks to the bravery of witnesses and the hard work of detectives, Deborah's killers finally faced justice after 13 heartbreaking years.
Scotty Shaver, Ed Foster, Chevalier Gill, and Ivory Shaver all received life sentences and are serving them now.
Adrienne Burnett, she cooperated with us during the whole investigation. She pled guilty to second-degree murder. She was offered a 20-year sentence. In that 20-year sentence, she would be eligible for parole in 6.
I did spend a lot of time with the woulda, coulda, shouldas, but I try not to think about it now.
Listening to those details and just seeing how brutal people could be to another individual, it was tough. It was tough. And it really reaffirmed why I do what I do.
That whole law enforcement system, it just inspired me. And I just wanted to be a part of that. I ended up becoming a dispatcher. I'm the person that's on the other line, helping with CPR or helping deliver a baby. And I'm the one who helps other people get home to their families. So I like it. It's a really good job.
Anytime you solve a homicide, there's a sense of satisfaction because of the level of crime that you're working. But in a cold case in particular, it's different because people around the victim may feel that the police have forgotten them, forgotten about their family. And when you can solve it, it's just like no other feeling out there.